And good evening, and welcome to this live stream with myself, Ruth from Top Schools. And I have a very special guest with us this evening. So let's bring him on. Please welcome Shaun Porter, Principal of Dalton School, Hong Kong. Hi, Shaun.
Hi, Ruth. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you for being here. So for those of you who are watching live, you have the opportunity to ask questions, to ask Shaun anything. And our topic this evening is Chinese without tears. I know, seems too good to be true. We're going to find out. So if you have any questions about bilingual learning, if you have objectives to have your child be bilingual, biliterate, if you have questions about the Dalton plan, the Dalton School in Hong Kong, or general primary school education, Shaun is ready and willing to answer your questions. So please go ahead and type in the comments. So Shaun, maybe we could make a start. Could you just, I know you relatively well. Could you just introduce yourself briefly and your role at the school?
Sure. So thank you for having me tonight. I guess quickly, my story sort of in education begins as a math teacher in the Bronx, New York. I actually originally was an investment banker, but decided kind of at the last minute that I decided I was tutoring math and coaching swim lessons at the same time, and realizing I was much more fulfilled and happy in life when I was doing those kinds of things. And so I got into education, and then I've been so fortunate to have an educational journey that's been, blessed with many amazing mentors that, one of which, Larry Levin, the founding principal at Dalton School, Hong Kong, is someone who recruited me to come out here to Hong Kong. And that was about 6.5 years ago that I came out to Hong Kong when we founded the primary school at Dalton. And I was really drawn to Dalton because at the time I was working at schools across mostly North America around, constructivist approaches to math teaching and also school leadership. But I feel like I was preaching a lot of things, but having a school or an organization that was really wanting to just fully commit to putting those kinds of things into practice was what I found in the Dalton organization here. And it's was something that began as a 1-year journey, and now I'm here, still here today, and really happy and loving being a part of the Dalton community.
So it's 7 years since the Dalton School started in Hong Kong, is it?
So it's a little over 10 years when the kindergarten opened in Pak Phalam,
Yes.
but about almost 7 years now with the primary school here in West Kowloon.
God, time flies.
I know.
And I know that there are plans for Dalton School, and we're already getting questions about the future plans. So thank you for your questions. Hang fire, because we definitely will get to the exciting developments that are happening at Dalton School for next year and beyond. So our topic today is Chinese without tears. Is it possible? Because, I think most people know, I went through this. My children are almost adults now, but we went through a lot of tears, I have to say. And so we do get parents who, excuse me, who aspire to bring up their children in Hong Kong. Typically, we want trilingual and biliterate. But at the very least, we want bilingual and biliterate, right? But at what expense? And so we see a lot of the costs, the negative, the costs, the downsides of going through a very traditional, rigorous approach to learning Chinese, which I think a lot of us have accepted that is the only way, but perhaps not. Please enlighten us.
Yes, I do think it's possible, and actually I think learning Chinese can be a really joyous experience, and that's what I have the privilege of getting to observe on a daily basis. But really, that is in many ways, the reason why Dalton School Hong Kong was created, was because there was a feeling of wanting to be able to kind of merge the worlds of progressive child-centered education with also a really strong Chinese language and culture education. And sometimes, I know kind of traditionally speaking, sometimes it feels like those two things don't always coexist, but I think we see that they really can. And I think for us, there are some things just about our philosophy and our ethos that really facilitate this. I think two big things we're a dual language school. And so what that really means is that students spend 50% of their time in English and 50% of their time in Chinese, and that's across subject areas. So they're not just learning, Chinese as a language. They're using it in a truly immersive way. So they're taking Chinese in PE. They're using Chinese in STEAM. They're using Chinese in music. So I think that helps cultivate, high interest in learning the language. And then the other, I think, really key pillar of the school, which goes back to the kind of the child-centered progressive philosophy, is that, the culture of the school plays an incredibly important role. So, it's creating a culture that's very loving, safe, and growth-oriented, where, yes, we have lots of different types of assessments that we use, but they can be low stakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And I think that creates a culture where, again, learning Chinese is difficult, but learning difficult things doesn't have to be, painful. And making mistakes is part of that learning process.
I think that's interesting. But so just to go back to clarify, the dual language thing is because lots of schools have different terminology, but in your school, that actually means it's an immersion environment. The teachers in the class for the Chinese time are only the Chinese teachers and vice versa. Is that right?
That is true, yes, and that thing. Thank you for kind of drawing that distinction. Yes, so as a dual language school, yes, they are. It is there's three main goals of a dual language program versus a bilingual program. The first is that students become, fully bilingual and biliterate, so being able to speak, listen, read, write, think, and translate in the two program languages. And then the second goal is that they can achieve high academic achievement across subject areas in both languages. And then the third kind of goes back to the culture idea. So that we're not just learning language in isolation, but promoting sociocultural competence. So understanding that, culture and respecting differences are, the part of the beauty of learning language, because language helps us, get to know people across different cultures in a more nuanced way.
Sociocultural confidence. I've not heard that before. That's interesting. I know that you're very well read. I think maybe one of the things we can ask you for at the end of this is for a few readings and books or articles that parents could read up on that sort of support all of what you're saying today. Let's go to a typical. I think a lot of the parents that we talk to every day have got rather young children. Maybe they're 2, 3, 4 years old, and they're sort of embarking on their school journey. And as I say, they have this objective of bilingualism and biliteracy. So when they start at, let's say, 3 years old, what are this? How are you planting those seeds that are going to allow them to be successful later on with the dual language?
So actually, for in terms of our dual language model, we actually begin that with little Dalton in pre-K. So even starting for our 2-year-olds, they're actually already following that 50-50 model. And I guess to help kind of visualize that, if you think of like a timetable, students actually spend one day entirely in one of the program languages. So Monday might be an entirely English day, then Tuesday would be entirely in Chinese, then back to English, then Chinese, and then Friday would be what we call like our metalinguistic day, where we're using both of the languages side by side. And so again, so they're really immersed if it's pre-K for the full half day, if it's K1, K2, that might be a half day or a full day experience. And so they're really getting opportunities to practice. At that age, right? It's definitely more of the speaking and listening skills, but they're doing kind of emergent reading and writing skills in both languages. But then also, I think because we place a strong emphasis on Chinese culture, so they're also I think seeing the value in learning the Chinese language. We talk a lot about our Chinese values, and I think that's something that I think also sparks an interest and a curiosity in wanting to learn more about the language.
It is such a key, crucial difference to reiterate to parents that in so many of the schools where they teach Chinese, they teach it as a subject and simply a language subject because they have to. It's obligatory to do so in an international school in Hong Kong. But there's such a crucial difference in that and in what you do, where you're teaching, as you say, they're immersed in Chinese, they're learning all of their subjects in Chinese, and they're experiencing the cultural side as well.
I agree. And I think, and we say 50-50, but if anything, I actually see someone even mention this in the comments that
you can see the comments. Yeah.
That English does sometimes in many international schools, I know English can just take over, right? Like that happens a lot, right? And that's something that we are really sensitive to, and something that actually as a leader, I'm constantly observing it at what is the play language. And I'm very proud that across grade levels, right, you still definitely hear lots of Mandarin. You do hear English. You might hear some Cantonese, right? There's different types of languages that are definitely being used at play, and English has not, taken over in those play spaces. But for us, we're saying that we value both languages equally. But because English is everywhere, right? It's dominant in media and things like that. If we're going to ever kind of give priority or promote one language or the other, we will lean more towards the Chinese in terms of trying to really kind of amplify and lift the Chinese language and Chinese culture, so that I think our kids really are kind of rooted in the Chinese culture, since we're based here in Hong Kong, and valuing that.
Yeah, and I think it's thank you for your question, Rosa. And I'm zeroing in on one of the words which I feel like, how do you prevent this? I mean, I'm sure, Shaun, you wouldn't want to prevent that, but then it's more, it's focusing on the value of speaking Chinese rather than preventing the English. Maybe you want to elaborate.
Yes, and I think that is you said it really nicely just now, that I think it is more, it's as the more that we can get our children to really value and be curious and want to learn and use the Chinese language, and also have ways to use the language beyond just the academic ways too, right? So like we have everything from like sports, like our basketball team and our badminton teams are coached in Mandarin, right? We have robotics classes that are in Mandarin, orchestras in Mandarin. We have speech teams, debate teams. We have our own. We participate in a battle of the books in English and Chinese. So I think these are all other ways that I think we can get students to just be excited about using the Chinese language. And so I think that, so it's not necessarily about having to prevent English use, but more about how can we really create lots of wonderful spaces for kids to be able to use their Chinese language.
Yeah, I mean, because I know that you're so well read, and I mean, what can you tell us about how language plays into the way that children and adults, for that matter, form relationships? I mean, isn't that going to be a central idea of acquiring a language naturally and valuing the use of that language?
Absolutely. And I think that goes into kind of, I think, like sort of two of my own kind of core beliefs. The one about that play is the engine of learning, right? So play, when we get to use language in playful ways, then we're really learning why we use language, right? The real purpose to language is to be able to connect with others. And I think that then feeds into the whole concept of why sociocultural competence is so important, because, here's this, when you have the power of language, you have this incredible ability, but also responsibility to use that in a way that helps you connect with other humans and value diversity and things like that. So I think it's a superpower.
See, I'm monolingual, so I'm very deficient in this area. But it is so interesting, and I think it's it's definitely one of the. It's something you and I have talked about, and I think it's definitely one of the, well, I want to say USP, but I can't think of anything else. It's embedded into the fabric of who you are as a school, right? As opposed to what I was saying earlier, it's not simply just taught as a language.
You're absolutely right. And when we opened the school, we were really, really fortunate to be able to work with Dr. Jose Medina. And at the time, he was with the Center for Applied Linguistics out of Washington, D.C. And so they're really the kind of leading think tank around dual language programming. And so everything in terms of how we designed the school was really built in the image of the research that was about 30 years of research that they had accumulated on dual language immersion programs. And so we were really, everything from, the timetables to some of the environmental print in the space, we were really able to design it, based on that research. And of course, every year we learn things, we learn how, we make tweaks and adjustments based on student needs. But I think we were so fortunate to have that, and Dr. Medina is still, someone that we're really fortunate to have that relationship with, in terms of supporting the school's dual language development.
All right, so time's running out. Gosh, we've got so much to cover and not enough time. I can see your questions. Thank you. If you do have any questions, we're live with Shaun Porter, principal of Dalton School in Hong Kong. We're talking about Chinese without tears, or anything related to Dalton School. Please ask in the comments below. I'll get to some of the comments that are coming in. Let's move on to slightly older children, and maybe we can tie this in with your plans as well to upwards. How does Chinese without tears continue as children are needing to learn, literacy, a lot of reading and writing?
Yes, and this is where I have to really, I feel like I'm going to sound like the proud parent who's going to brag about my kids. So I'm going to brag about our students but especially our faculties. I think our Chinese department is really, really amazing. So I already spoke about kind of that loving approach to teaching and learning, but I think, there's a huge emphasis on trying to think about how can we make, difficult learning fun, because when learning is fun, then, engagement and rigor really go hand in hand. And so I would say there's kind of three kind of sort of key strategies that are regularly used when we're starting to think about more advanced, reading and writing type of skills. And I would classify those as being able to like storify or contextualize content to be more relevant to kids' lives. Being able to socialize it. So kids obviously, the more you can, especially as kids get older and older, their peer interactions are so important to them. So if you can make learning more social. And then a third way is, everybody loves games, right? So being able to gamify something that might be, more ordinary or even perceived as traditional, we can always find interesting ways to gamify that. And the team does like such creative things with that. So like with gamifying, just things I've recently observed in classrooms, right? So something simple when children are first learning characters, writing characters. Obviously, like something like as an English writer, right? I can write, kind of a letter, kind of any order I want, right? And I can use any kind of style I want. But Chinese, the stroke order matters, right? And there's kind of a strict application of that. Our reception team uses something that they call the rainbow stroke. So it follows kind of the order of the rainbow, and they're able to kind of follow the stroke order in that sort of sequence. Rather than flashcards, they do different things like a Chutes and Ladders game where they're doing like character identification, reading characters on a game board. So little things like that, I think, can make a really big difference because practice is an essential part of learning. I think all languages, but especially Chinese. Mm-hmm. So you have to find, I think, fun ways for kids to want to regularly work with the language. And the team really does amazing things to get kids motivated to do that.
But for older children, Shaun, when it's, when you're moving out of the flashcards and the rainbow strokes, kind of when, 9, 10, 11 years old, can it still be fun?
Yes, it can actually. And I'm glad you asked that, because there's two things that I also observed recently in upper primary, and also one was in our first middle school grade. So going back to that idea of contextualizing learning and making it relevant to students, I think our older students are definitely showing an interest in social media. So something that I've observed teachers doing is, they might be analyzing an ancient poem, right? So obviously that's as traditional as it gets, right? In terms of looking at a text that's thousands of years old. And then, but rather than just doing kind of a simple reading response to that, the teacher had the kids do basically like a social media response. So they got to do she had created this little template where they could like it, comment it. And it was something that was cute, but the kids were very into actually talking about this ancient poem just by making it something that was more modern in terms of how they interacted with it. Mm-hmm. And then in our 6th grade, we do a lot of inquiry-based learning. And so in the first unit this year, the 6th graders focused on trying to solve problems in the Hong Kong community. And so ultimately what the kids ended up doing is they designed a board game that could be played in, that's there. There was a Chinese version and an English version. And the kids were basically had come up with these different types of missions that were based on problems happening in Hong Kong. And so it required research. They had to, they created and designed the game board, which had a lot of they had a rule book that was written in both languages. So they're doing a lot of actually very difficult skill work. but it doesn't feel that way, right? Because they're really interested and excited about the topic that they're engaged in.
Yeah. How much home support is required from the parents? Because we know in a traditional school where, there's a lot of homework, especially the Chinese seems to be, extended into after school hours. And especially if parents maybe don't have that level of Chinese literacy, what have you seen over the years in terms of how the parents can support or need to support their children in school?
Sure. Yeah, home learning is an interesting one, because I think a lot of research doesn't necessarily support heavy amounts of home learning.
Mm.
However, I would say our home learning assignments definitely do correlate to the age of the child in terms of that kind of like time demand. But for us, what's really important is that we cultivate a culture of reading. So reading is a must. The children must be reading at home every night, in both languages. And so anything that families can do to really kind of cultivate that, to help support that culture of reading, helping to purchase texts that are of an interest for your child, because that will encourage that reading habit. And then even as young as grade 1, there is a little bit of Chinese home learning assignments that take place in terms of practicing writing. But it's not writing the same character 20 times, right? It's nuanced to the child, because I was talking about this with Wenhong, who is our vice principal and head of Chinese. Not every child needs to write characters many times, right? For some kids, writing it 3 or 4 times, it'll go to memory, right? Some do need to write it more in order for it to really go to memory. So it's nuanced to the child. But then, of course, as they get older, those expectations across not just Chinese, but in general, that does increase, because we're also trying to instill that kind of personal responsibility and self-directed learning. But yes, but now your question though, as far as families who might not have access to Mandarin at home, I would be lying if I didn't say that didn't present some challenges. It definitely is, but I think what's again, what no matter whether you speak the language or not, things that you can do is you can help promote that culture of reading at home, right? You can show an interest in learning the language and the culture with your child, right? So especially like if you want to go for different types of cultural experiences around the city, you can. If you want to take a Sunday trip to Shenzhen, so that your child can kind of practice using their Mandarin, that's a great opportunity. But again, I think it also just depends on the individual child in terms of maybe if they need any extra support outside of school, and that's something that we would just be working with the family closely on that. But we also try to provide as much of that one-to-one and small group support within the school day as well. So that if a child, lots of things happening within the day, but then we also have an after-school program for children who need that additional language support too.
But again, I mean, speaking from my own experience for a moment as well, it's just so important that the community recognizes the whole value of the embeddedness, which I don't think is a real word, of the language in the whole culture of the school. Because as soon as a few of the friends or the other parents, kind of lose interest and start sort of drifting off and thinking, oh, it's just not worth it, that can spread like wildfire and can be really very contagious.
And that is true, but we are really fortunate to be supported by, I would say, an amazing parent community who I think really is committed to this kind of dual language philosophy, because that is a commitment, right? If you just want to do dual language for 1 year, not worth it, right? There's no purpose in doing that. It is a longer term commitment in terms of being able to really become fully bilingual, biliterate, and that's not something that can happen overnight. And so much of that too is because kids just need more time to be immersed in the language, and the more time that we can immerse them in the language, the more likely they'll reach that point.
And do you ever find that? I mean, I found that a lot of parents give up too quickly, and I mean that's not only for children's schooling these days, but there seems to be like an on button where if a child reaches, if they've been immersed in the language since the age of 2, let's say, it might not happen to the age of 6 or 7 or 8, where there seems to be like a switch where suddenly the child is completely fluent, but that, of course they're not. That's been happening all of the time, but it's something about confidence levels or just comfort levels.
It's true. I think, I think when it comes to physical growth, I think everyone accepts that growth happens in spurts, but I don't think we always look at academic growth the same way. And I think that you're right. Every day there's sort of building blocks that are happening kind of, sort of under the water. But then all of a sudden you have a breakthrough and you make this kind of big leap in learning that's very visible. But you're right. You're chipping away at that kind of at that every day.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And it's such a shame when parents sort of give up before they've seen the fruits of their efforts, So.
yes, and there can be frustrating moments, but actually going back to Dr. Medina, he really, I think, helped us also have that kind of patience and persistence when he spoke about the idea of even if you just compare a monolingual child to a child in a dual language setting, right? A monolingual child might be performing at like the highest level 10, right? But that's as high as they're going to go. Whereas a child in a dual language setting, maybe at a young stage, they might be at, let's say, an 8 in one language and a 5 in the other. Put 8 and 5 together, you've already at 13. But there's that potential to actually get all the way up to that kind of double 10 in terms of having full mastery of the two languages.
Yeah.
But it is research shows with dual language settings. With Spanish and English or French and English, it's like a 5 to 7 year window. The Chinese and English, because of the distance between the two languages, you're looking at more of like 7 to 10 years for that full biliteracy level.
We are going to run out of time, so I've got a couple more questions. First one, can we deal with this? This is another question from Rosa. How is the Dalton plan different from Montessori on a practical level?
So actually, that's a really interesting question, because I don't know if many people know that there's I would say a common lineage with Montessori and the Dalton plan. So Maria Montessori and Helen Parkhurst were basically, it's like kind of like a Socrates and Plato type of relationship, right? So Helen Parkhurst, who was the author of the Dalton plan, actually studied with Maria Montessori. And so they were really some of the early progressive thinkers in kind of the early 20th century. So there's a lot of sort of, I think, shared values between like a Montessori and a Dalton plan system. What I like really about the Dalton plan, though, is I think two things, and I think that they are nuanced things that maybe separate a little bit from Montessori, and why you see Dalton plan used maybe more in like a primary and secondary setting, is that I think the Dalton plan is really about individualizing to the child and putting them in a position of leadership and autonomy over their learning. And then two, excuse me, the Dalton plan is something that I just went blank on my second point, but it'll come back to me. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, I lost sound.
Yeah, so I'm muted. You were talking about the child taking control of their learning and being autonomous.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and so in the second point, though, is that the Dalton plan is also a framework, right? So in terms of like that sounds lovely that you're able to put a child in a position of leadership and that they can have autonomy over your learning, but how do you do that? And so it is, it's not a curriculum, but it is a framework that is structured where you have the house, the lab, and the assignment that are really, I would say, vehicles that do help you in a structured way release more and more of that control to the child.
Okay. All right. I think we've been going for half an hour. If you have any more questions for Shaun, we're with Shaun Porter, principal of Dalton School. Any questions related to the Dalton School, or our topic is Chinese without tears? You have a few more minutes to get those questions in. I want to move on as well. Rosa's asked a lot of questions tonight. Hi, Rosa. And there's another one of your fans, Shaun, I think, Ling. Let's talk about plans, because it's not a coincidence that we've brought you on to talk to us in October of 2023, because there are exciting plans afoot for Dalton School in Hong Kong. Would you like to share what those are?
Sure. Yeah. So and thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about that. So yes, so we just recently announced in September that we are going to be, it's kind of a multi-tiered thing. So we are going to be moving our campus to Stubbs Road in the Wan Chai mid-levels area at the current Rosary Hill site. We are going to be now offering more things at Dalton. So we'll continue to have our mini Dalton, Little Dalton, and DSHK international streams that we currently have. but we'll also now be, integrating a local stream based on the current Rosary Hill local stream, and then also a primary local stream. And then we're also very excited by being able to have, expanded outdoor facilities in a larger space that we're going to be able to now become a full throughway school by adding a middle and high school, international middle and high school.
So it's quite confusing, even though I know you've explained it to me a few times already. I'm sorry. So DSHK is the international stream, and you are now at grade. What grade are you currently at in?
We currently go all the way up to grade 6.
Grade 6, and so then you'll be able to extend. Are you extending 1 year at a time, or are you opening up grades 6 to 12?
We are extending 1 year at a time. So, and that's actually what we've done since when we moved here and we started the school, we only had grade 1.
Yeah. So for 2024-25 academic year, you'll be having grade 7 class.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. That part I'm clear on. And then the local stream, and this is Rosa's question. So how does the local stream work?
Sure. So already currently at Rosary Hill, there is a local, it's a private kindergarten and a private primary school that are offering the local curriculum. And so part of this, kind of whole process is that we're coming together. Now the new school sponsoring body from 24-25 will become Dalton. And so from the Dalton ethos and value set, we'll be offering this local stream option as well as the international option. So the international but now in terms of what is kind of shared and common, whether you're the local stream or the international stream, is really that Dalton ethos around, child-centered progressive pedagogy, a culture of, that kind of culture of love and care, and making sure, children feel safe to make mistakes, all that kind of, wonderful stuff that I think is what people love about Dalton now. But I know it's also what people love about Rosary Hill now too. They really value things like that kind of a family-like culture. And so that was where we felt like there was a real synergy in some of the school values and being able to kind of really continue that ethos in a local stream as well as an international stream. Where there's some differences between the streams, though, would be in the curriculum, right? So in the international curriculum, we're using the dual language model. We're following the American Common Core on the English side, and we're following the mainland Chinese curriculum on the Chinese side. Whereas in the local stream, following the local curriculum, and also there is a different language model used within the local stream.
Can you tell us what that language model is?
Sure. So in the local stream, but now in primary school there are still Putumayo classes, and then also we'll have shared sort of extracurricular and sports teams, right? So there'll still be some of those immersion Putumayo classes as well, but there's also some Spanish and Cantonese as classes in the local stream as well.
Okay, so there'll be some English, Cantonese, Spanish, and Mandarin.
But predominantly the English and the Putumayo in the primary.
Okay. Exciting.
Yeah, it is. And I think what we're also very excited about is I think, we really do believe in what we're doing. And so I think being able to now, have broaden the mission of Dalton is something that I think we're really excited to be able to do with our kind of new friends at Rosary Hill.
Yeah. So I think we will bring the conversation to a conclusion. I know you're still at school, Shaun, so you need to get home and have your dinner, but thank you so much for joining us.
We had parent-teacher conferences today, which is always a happy day too. So it's nice to be able to connect with families and to be able to connect with you tonight.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember attending the opening ceremony at the Dalton School with Larry. I mean, if that was 7 years ago, time has just flown. But I can see, I mean, we've been working with you all of that time, and I can see that over the years, it takes, it does take several years to really build trust and confidence. And maybe you've grown the school from the numbers was very, very small when you started. I mean, what are your enrollment numbers at now?
Yeah, so that first year when we opened, we had 9 students at this big campus here in West Kowloon, and now we have almost 500. So we are, and considering the all the factors of Hong Kong and with COVID and everything, we are very fortunate to still be to definitely be growing. And that I think that's a huge testament to the faculty in terms of their just dedication and belief in what we're doing. Also the parent population, especially some of our first believers, is it takes a leap of faith to trust something that you can't necessarily fully visualize. And then kind of again part of why I'm here was that the also there's just the organization from every level, like the board too, that commitment to really like progressive education, dual language, and promoting Chinese culture is something that we're really, really fortunate to have that belief and support at every level of the organization.
Yeah, it's a very robust, I would say, leadership team with yourself,
Thank you.
and that means that in the new with the new developments, you've got more space for more students.
Yes, no. So I think the new space is definitely larger, and I think one of the key enhancements is that it's going to have outdoor facilities, which is something that we're lacking now. So we're very excited to have the outdoor sporting facilities, as well as a lot more things for like performing arts and things like that. It does allow for vertical expansion. It allows for some horizontal expansion, but part of again having the local and the international stream. One of the advantages of that is I think actually it also means that we don't necessarily get so big horizontally in one stream, right? So I think we get to maintain some of that kind of small school family feel of that we have now, even though we're going to be in a larger site.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have you on again, and we look forward to visiting when it's ready. So Shaun, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to those of you who watched us live. This replay will be available. And if you have any questions, if you're watching on replay and you have questions for Shaun, please go ahead and type them here and we'll make sure that he gets to see them and can answer them as well. So Chinese without tears is possible at the Dalton School in Hong Kong, at least. And it's been really very interesting to sort of unpack that a bit more. Shaun, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for joining tonight.
All right. Have a good evening. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.